this is bad, while you keep eating it. Hi guys, my name is Kristen. Welcome back to my channel. Kristen is Fully Booked. In 2020, I started 39 series. It was kind of a big reading year for me. I've already done a video where I talk about the series that I started and completed in 2020. I'm going to do one where I share the series that I am planning to continue or are continuing. And today I'm going to be sharing a video of all the series that I definitely probably won't be continuing. I do have quite a lot of them, so to keep this fairly short in video length, I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. So to get things started, the first series that I started and have absolutely no intention on continuing is The Iron King by Julie Kagawa. This is the Iron Fae series. I actually liked the idea and setup for this story. A human teenage girl discovers that she is actually half Fae, and that her best friend is actually Puck from the Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, and is secretly her Fae protector, and also possibly in love with her. Her brother is exchanged for a changeling, and she has to go into the Fae world to try to get her brother back. However, this book really read on the younger side of young adult. Everything just happens really quickly, and so it doesn't feel like anything is fully developed, whether that is the characters, the plot, or the conflict at large. It was so quick that it just really wasn't for me. I don't think it is bad per se. It's just not for me. The next series is the Fallen Empire series, and this is the first book in that series is Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. This is a fantasy romance series. This was a hate to love romance where the male love interest first blackmails and then kidnaps the female against her will in order to exclusively serve his own interests and won't let her return home. Somehow, because his goals sort of somewhat line up with her goals, like it's like an against the empire sort of thing, she at some point becomes okay with all of this and goes along with it, and there's sort of a fake marriage component as well. Honestly, I skimmed the whole second half of this book. It, at a certain point, like really shifts into the interests of this guy and his kingdom, or like his people, and I don't feel like that is where the first half of the book was setting up to go, and so I just like I did not care about that plot. And I had pretty mixed feelings about the romance plot as well. Like, it definitely like sucked me in a little bit, but the whole time I was like, yeah, I just don't really like the abduction romance, as you know, I made a whole video about that. So I just really didn't care. And I have heard that the next book in the series follows a different character and like the romance there, I'm sure. And honestly, I just have no interest in reading the next one. I don't care enough about the world that this is set in, or the character that is in like one scene of the first book that we're following in the next book to draw me into picking up the next book in any way, shape, or form. The next series is also by Grace Draven, and that is the Wraith Kings series. I have read the first 2 books in this series, Radiance and Eidolon. This is a series that I actually do really like, and I'll explain why I'm not going to continue it. The first book is a political marriage setup where we have a human female character and a male character who is of the species Kai. They're sort of like humanoid in shape, but you know, they have really sharp teeth, really sharp claws. They have like pupil-less eyes, you know, and the whole setup or premise is that the 2 species find the other species horribly unattractive, disgusting, and like terrifying. Romance was actually really great in this book. I know Radiance is a pretty popular fantasy romance because it is just like such a great relationship. The 2 sort of decide to go into this political marriage with like mutual respect. They develop an amazing like friendship, and they just like really care for each other. And obviously things progress into more of a romance. There's like not really a ton of plot in the first book, but it's like such a healthy, amazing relationship to read about. The second book, Eidolon, is the same romantic couple where they are now in a situation where there are sort of external world conflict happening, and we watch sort of the pressure that that puts on the relationship and how the two people deal with this sort of external world conflict and how that is affecting their relationship. So it was really great. I've heard that there is a third book and that it is going to follow a different romantic couple now, and it is also going to be sort of this like, now it's the female character is the Kai and that it's a human man. Both those characters exist in the first two books, and I just like don't really feel interested enough in seeing that same setup again. The next series that I do not plan on finishing is the Chaos Born series by Drew Karpyshyn. The first book is Children of Fire, and I read this with my fantasy book club. This is an adult fantasy book or series that plays on the chosen one trope, where we have essentially 4 potential chosen ones introduced into the mix very early on. It was a multi-POV book that essentially jumps to any head and perspective at any given time that it needs to in order to make you see the plot point that it wants you to see. I think there was something like 9 different perspectives in the first 4 or 5 chapters. Like, it was really crazy. The beginning follows essentially the births of these 4 potential chosen ones, and we watch them sort of grow up, and it like sort of like jumps a little bit in time, a little bit in time, a little bit in time. At first, that was really interesting. However, it continued on for so long that the plot doesn't feel like it kicks in until about the 2/3 mark. And then overall, I would just say like the writing is not amazing. I feel like there were some interesting ideas here, but the execution just wasn't really for me. It was like, I don't want to say basic, but it was a little bit basic. Because this was a fantasy book club book, I kind of made myself finish it. And the person who recommended this book, he always finishes books that I make him read, like ACOTAR, even though it's not his thing. So I had to finish this book, but I was bored enough by the 2/3 mark that when things started happening, I was just like, I'm just over it. I do know what happens in the rest of the series, and I just don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything by not completing it. The next series that I do not plan on finishing is the Crave series by Tracy Wolff. Oh man, this book. The first book is essentially a modernized or updated version of Twilight with some additional paranormal and fantasy species thrown into the mix. Not really sure why we needed that. And the first book was sort of just like candy, where I was like, as is the Twilight series, where you're like, this is bad while you keep eating it. It is set in our world, and it is full of pop culture references, and the writing was not to my taste either. There were actual, like, a lot of like OMGs and stuff like that all throughout, although she did back off of this a little bit in the second book.
Hold up.
Yes, I did pick up the second book, Crush, but I DNF'd it pretty quickly. It is just sort of like an easy teen drama if that is what you're looking for. What really threw me was that I actually did start reading the next book, Crush, and just like absolutely hated it. She basically starts to character assassinate a character pretty early on, and the whole time you're like, oh no, is this where that's going? And she plays around with the idea of mates again, but honestly in like the most annoying way possible. And it made me never want to read this particular trope ever again. I actually stopped, looked up a bunch of reviews, and everyone was like, oh no, is this where this is going? And then everyone was like, yes, and yeah, just could not finish it. I'll say that it feels a lot like an arc, very similar to the ACOTAR series and the Twilight series. And ACOTAR successfully won me over. This did not. Okay, the final series that I'll be mentioning today is the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard. I feel like this is a pretty standard young adult fantasy that feels like a dystopian series that really had its moment in the early to late 2010s. In a post-Hunger Game world, I had very strong Hunger Games feel moments throughout the first book. This series takes place in a world where there are essentially two classes of people. There are the silver-blooded people who have superpowers and are the ruling class, and then there are the sort of like Joe Blow, red-blooded people who don't have any powers. The main character, Mara, is red-blooded but discovers that she does have power, even though she isn't supposed to. And then in order to continue this idea that the red-blooded people, there's no way they could have power, she gets sucked into the ruling class where she has to pretend that she is silver-blooded. Overall, I sort of enjoyed the first book, Red Queen, while I was reading it. It didn't feel like anything particularly special or new, but there was enough there that was like familiar and comfortable that you're like, yeah, this is like a nice, easy, fun YA read. Although it is one where everyone is in love with the main character, even though she's sort of like aggressively described as being just normal, plain Jane, but then like all of the boys are really into her. She has like 3 potential love interests. I do think that things developed a little bit quickly, as is sometimes the case with young adult series, but really why I'm sort of not continuing on with this series, or like probably won't be continuing on with this series, is that I read at the end of the first book, there was like a little, like the first couple chapters of the second book, like bonus content, and it just really didn't draw me in. Like, I'll never say never, but like there are so many other things, so many other series, so many other books that I would prefer to read over having the sense of completion of finishing this series. I'm not losing sleep over not knowing where this goes. Anyway, that is it for today. Have you read any of these series? Do you agree with my sort of intent to discontinue them? Or if there's a series here that you're like, yes to like valid on what you said, but that gets corrected, or like it's worth it to see where this goes, let me know. As I said, I'm not saying never, I'm just saying like, yeah, probably not. That's it for me today. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.